area. I thought she got the ball.
Hello, welcome back, everybody. This is going to be your regular Tuesday panel show, and we're in that gray area at the moment where Spurs have made two signings, technically, in Matisse Tell and the new player, Kota Takai, but we are waiting, till the big marquee signing starts getting rumored with Tottenham Hotspur, and we'll be chatting about the new signing. We'll be chatting about Kota Takai, not really as much about him, more about what it maybe means for young center backs that could be coming through, or at least we're given the pathway, or at least shown maybe a pathway to get into the first team. I think this new signing of this Japanese young talented center back might be blocking the pathway of your Alfie Dorringtons, your potentially your Ashley Phillips and whatnot. So some interesting questions that I think we have come up with this new signing. And then also we'll be talking about the Eze rumors, whether you believe them or not. We were told a lot about Eze coming to the club last summer, but it didn't actually happen, did it? So we'll be chatting about it again, see whether you believe it this time, whether we'll fall for these ITK rumors once again. And then lastly, we'll be chatting about Spurs and just sort of the general vibe of the transfer window so far. We've seen plenty of other teams make already some big moves. Liverpool have already spent well over 150 million, it looks like. And you're seeing some other clubs, that we are competing with inside that top four Champions League kind of places that have already made some big signings. So when will Spurs start to follow suit? But we'll get into this one, everybody. Good to see so many good faces already in the chat and in the house. I'm seeing Queen Ellie, Sam, of course, plugging the show. Appreciate you, brother. And we have Futures Bright, Futures Lily White, Kev G, King Hoddle, Shemi Tan, Kim. So many good people in the house here. Seeing James from Spurs Related as well. Eugene is in the house as well. K32, Kieran, Terry Wright. So many lovely people. Before we get into it, smash the like button, please. Get into the comments. And also, if you want to interrupt the show, if you disagree with anything Johnny, Sam, Dave, or myself have to say, you can also feel free to put it in as a super chat. It does support the channel, but also gets your comments heard and discussed straight away. But I'll get into it. Let's go straight to it. Let's go to Kota Takai, and we'll be talking about the impact of that signing. Spurs have completed the signing of Kota Takai from Kawasaki Frontale for a record fee for the J-League of £5 million. The 20-year-old center back is 6'4" tall and is regarded as one of the top young prospects from the J-League at this moment in time. While he may be very talented, though, Johnny, are you worried that Spurs could be blocking the pathway for the other, many talented center backs, young center backs, in fact, that we already have at the club? Alfie Dorrington, who occupies a homegrown, club-trained spot. Luka Vuskovic, who we know would be homegrown at some stage, and Ashley Phillips. This Takai signing, I feel like, could be blocking their pathway. What do you think?
We'll go win Japanese. Well, we'll go win Japanese, don't you think so? Yeah. I mean, really. I mean, look, we haven't bought anyone from Thailand yet. Maybe that's coming. Look, I know people are going to be skeptical. I can understand it, to be truthful with you. It is a strange one, but if you can pick up a deal for a good price, what do you do? Do you just add it into the mix? I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say I've been watching him since he was 7 years old and eating Paul Weetabix like some. No, listen, I didn't know anything about him. I spoke to somebody, funny enough, who was in one of our other group chats, whose wife, I think, is Japanese, so he watches Japanese TV, football, should I say. And he said he's a very good player. He's rated one of the best defenders to come out of Japan. It's the most anyone's paid for a Japanese player out of Japan, £5 million. And there were other clubs looking at him. And I think we pour a lot of scorn on some of these deals. But when you look at things like 2 million for Ashley Phillips, 8 million for Lucas Bergvall, 12 million for Papasar, 15 million for Destiny Adogi, 17 million for Vicario. I think what we always look for is something exciting. And of course, it's not exciting. Let's be honest. It's not exciting. But that should be irrelevant, right? What we want, whether it's 5 million or 70 million, right? We want a player that's going to come in and affect the squad, or at least at some stage affect the squad. And I remember going to QPR, first game of the pre-season, and watching Lucas Bergvall, and me going on, and on about what an incredible player he was. And my friend who was a QPR supporter next to me said, calm down, this is only QPR, right? And we are shit. So, don't get ahead of yourself. And I was bigging him up, and then Galatasaray happened. And he had a terrible game, got exposed, as everyone said, but I kept the faith. Now you look at it now as £8 million, unbelievable deal for £8 million for that player. And I think you can be cynical, but you have to let these players, come in and see what they can do. And I mean, the first thing it's going to say is, why are you buying him when you've got Ashley Phillips at 6'5", absolute monster, who had a whole season at Stoke, who half the championship want to sign, who's got pace and power. And now we're not playing kamikaze football. He will probably do very well in that system, as will, in my opinion, Dragusin. I think Alfie Dorrington, he had not half a season, a bit of a season from sort of January onwards, playing for Aberdeen, tasted a bit of victory. He'd probably go out on loan again. But so the question is, why? So looking at all the different systems that he plays, I don't think he's going to want to try and change this system massively, guys, because he will look for transition. If he tries to completely change the way Spurs play, I think he's going to end up with egg on his face. So I think he'll have to transition it. But I still do think there's a good possibility he's going to play 5 at the back.
Yeah. With how many center backs we have on the books, it looks like we could be playing 5 at the back.
I don't know about you guys, but one of the most frustrating things for me last season was seeing someone like Destiny Udogie, who I absolutely loved when he was at Udinese, right out there on the flank, grabbing hold of the ball, almost hugging that touchline, running down the wing, cutting inside and unleashing shots, crossing balls. Destiny Udogie had 1 assist all season last season because he was so inverted. And I think Thomas Frank, knowing how he is tactically, I think he will push him wide. So and Porro as well. And I actually think we will have 3 centre backs. I think the thing he's going to need more than anything is a 6. I don't think he will compromise on the 6. I hope it's not Norgard. Not that I don't think Norgard's any good, but I just don't know whether he'll have the legs as he tries to overload the flanks there. But I think that's the reason. And let's be honest, guys. Even with Danso and all the rest of it, we had situations last year where Davis was injured, Romero was injured, and Mickey van der Ven's injured. Right? This is a squad game, and we are in the Champions League. We're in the Premier League, and we're in the Carabao Cup. So I don't think you can have too many. I think the biggest issue for the club is why aren't we buying club trained? And whether that's Dennis Kirkin or it's Carl Peters, or if you go really left field and bring in Noni as a club trained player, that's another option. If Chelsea end up trying to get Kolo Muani, which they are, then maybe Noni would become excess to requirements. But I think that's the biggest issue we should be asking ourselves, not so much why have we got another centre back.
Mm-hmm. I mean, someone said in the comments, Stateside Footy Dave, you said it's a good problem to have if you have this much talent coming through and these many guys competing for the one spot. It's not actually a problem. It's, if anything, it's a blessing having so many young, talented center backs competing for similar positions in the 25-man squad.
No, 100%. Look, it is a blessing in disguise. And I think one thing we've got to remember, and I think Johnny sort of alluded to it, we're going to be playing across 4 competitions next season. Right now, when there is no games, you're looking at that squad and you're going, we're stockpiled, we're fairly bloated. But as that season gets going, and as we've seen last season, your squad very quickly thins out. So I do think there's an opportunity for 1, maybe 2 of them next season. You've got to remember, Radu Dragusin, he had an ACL injury. You've got to factor in that there could be a bit of a reset, or or a step backwards on that there's a chance he might injure himself or take half a season to get up to speed. So for me, I think there's an opportunity there for one or two of them to be kept about, especially because Thomas Frank likes to rotate between a back four at times and a back five. So again, he's going to have the options there. So I have no problem with Spurs sort of stockpiling the talent and having the talent down. We've got some wonderful players. You've got Alfie Dorrington, got a half a season of men's football in the Scottish League under his belt, and it says a lot that they got into the final and he played and he was only there for half a season. You've got Fiskovic. He's ripped up 3 men's senior leagues around Europe already: Croatia, Poland, and Belgium. Not only that, he scores goals. You've got Ashley Phillips, 2 seasons of championship football under his belt at Plymouth and Stoke. Then you've got this guy,
Takai.
I'm going to butcher his name. Takai. Yeah, you've got this guy coming in here as well, apparently very, very highly rated. So you've got enough options there. And look, to be fair, Adi Dragson ain't too much older than them either. Also, you got Dante Casanova, 21 years of age, recently just signed a 2-year contract. So we're absolutely stockpiled with defenders and with especially centre backs. And I have no problem with that. It's a good thing, because at the end of the day, the cream of the crop, the cream always rises to the top. So, the best players will eventually end up coming through out of that. But where my problem comes in is Daniel Levy has come out and said he wants to win the Premier League and the Champions League, right? Every Spurs fan knows we need to be signing players of quality, players of a certain experience to come in here to help drag us to even try and compete in the Champions League next season so that we don't get embarrassed. And the teams that we're coming up against have already made their marquee signing. So even further down the line, if we do make a marquee signing, we're already playing catch up. You know what I mean? I think we're already behind the boat. And that's where my problem comes in with these signings. It's sort of like, I get that, but I'm sorry. This could have been one that we could have wrapped up later on in the window, and stuff like that. At the end, I have no problems with it. But Jesus Christ, start bringing in some players ready-made to go for the first team. Because the reality is, we can sit here and say this guy has all this potential and everything else. We've done the same with Yang. Some people are going, he'll step up to Tottenham. And I always said, hang on, it's a massive difference moving over, continents and going into Europe, where it's a lot more physical, a lot more faster, a lot more technical, etc., etc. It's a much bigger step up than people anticipate. So it's sort of like where I think our issue comes in. It doesn't move the needle. It doesn't say, fuck me, what a signing. He's going to walk straight into the first team. And it's sort of continuing on a trend. Last summer, we all knew we needed 4 or 5 quality players. What did they do? They brought in Dom Solanke about 2 weeks before the season starts, didn't even have a preseason, and they made a lot of youngster signings, and I just feel like it's going the same again. At the end of the day, we can sit here and blame Postecoglou for everything, but the reality is the squad wasn't good enough. Some of the youngsters done good, yes, but the reality is the squad isn't good enough. So we need to fix the issues in the squad, which means you need to bring in more experienced players to put more points on the board, so that when the games come in thick and fast, you can rotate your squad and you don't see the drop-off we see at Tottenham Hotspur. And that's where I think my frustration comes in around these. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to knock the kid. I'm going to give him every opportunity. And you can never have too much talent. But at the end of the day, other teams are making signings for their first team. And what are we doing again?
Can you make the case, Sam, though, that we do maybe have too much talent in the center back department? Like, we have 3 very good options in Alfie Dorrington, Ashley Phillips, and Luka Vuskovic. Like, why add another one? What sort of message are you also sending maybe to those guys that have been promised, you would think, at some point, that pathway into the first team? Like, could a Ashley Phillips be a bit disillusioned now? Could Alfie Dorrington be disillusioned? Vuskovic, maybe? I'm not sure. One of them's got to be a bit pissed off or maybe a bit worried about their future.
Well, I mean, their future's kind of been in turmoil since Ange was at the club, in my opinion. We went through a massive centre-back crisis in the first season.
Sam, your mic's a bit.
Yeah, your mic is sounding not
in and out. It's very hard to make out what you're saying. Just quickly, why we give Sam a quick chance to fix that. One thing I wanted to add as well, actually, is the good thing about some of our options in that young stockpile is the likes of Alfie Dorrington and Ashley Phillips. If you do want to keep them around, they don't have to be registered in the Premier League squad and don't have to be registered in the Champions League squad. And technically, they can still play because they're academy players. They've both played for the academy. So technically, so you can keep them around, play them in games, but don't actually have to waste spaces in the squad when you're registering for them 2 guys. I'm not sure if the same for Fiskovic and this new kid coming in, but I do know I'm almost pretty sure with Dorrington and Phillips, they won't have to be registered and you can play them.
It shows they would really rate Takai, though, if they brought him in, because he's not going to occupy any sort of homegrown qualification or anything, right? He is going to be technically a non-homegrown player. So even though he is very young, they are bringing in someone of a similar age to Dorrington, Phillips, Vuskovic. But this one, compared to Vuskovic, compared to Dorrington, compared to Phillips, won't actually qualify as homegrown. So they would have to really rate him if they are going to be, giving these guys competition. It does feel like we already have a plethora of young talent to pick from. So I don't know. I can see the argument from stateside footy, saying that, it's a good problem to have, but I already rate the guys that we have. So I just wonder what sort of message you're then sending to them. But maybe competition is just how it works. It's the brutal reality of sport.
Yeah.
It's just what kind of comes with the territory. Sam, let's try you again, maybe on the mic. I mean, how do you I think the question I asked you was, right, is there a thing as having too much talent?
Is my mic all right now?
I think it's a bit clearer. Yeah.
Much better.
Cool. Yeah, look, we do have a lot of talent, but you said, I think in the first question you asked about like, should they fear for the future or something like that. And to be honest, I think that their future's been in jeopardy, at least their Tottenham future's been at jeopardy since Ange came in. We had that injury crisis around January in the first season, and he let Ashley Phillips go. I think Dorrington had a serious injury, so I can't get at him for not playing Dorrington. But letting Phillips go for me was a very strange incident, and one that I kept noted against Ange. I haven't seen either of the two play much, but I see a lot of Stoke fans, saying that Phillips is a very promising young defender. He's clearly a physical specimen. As you said, 6'5". He's built like a shit house, as they say, right?
Yeah.
They all are, really. Vuskovic, Takai,
exactly.
All of them really are.
I would argue Dorrington's probably a bit different. He's more technically good rather than, big like the rest of them. Yeah. I think that's an area where Dorrington actually, probably does need to, is just bulk up a bit and bring that physicality.
Well, I read, as I was waiting sort of to say my point about it before, I read King Hoddle basically say what I was going to say, which was it could also just be the Chelsea model. It was an opportunity that was too good to let go. And if he comes in and he works, then great, you've got a good player for $2.5 million. If he doesn't, then you're gonna get 3 to 5 million in profit at least. So that also might be a way that you look at it, and they're thinking they're going to give the other guys a go. This is, we'll give this guy a little bit of time, see if he can settle. Otherwise, like a lot of Japanese players do well in like the other leagues, like in the Bundesliga.
Yeah,
see a lot of defensive Japanese players.
That's actually true. That was in the back of my head as well. Like, I wonder if Spurs are maybe adopting the Chelsea model of the past, where they had so many talented youngsters, and then they just sort of waited to see which one would actually win out, for whatever role or whatever position was available. But then you did see a lot of them then go off to other clubs and do exceptionally well, like the Kevin De Bruyne's and the Mo Salahs, of the world.
And what did they do?
It is a good problem to have, but you want one of them to be given that chance.
With the Chelsea,
they won trophies.
Just quickly, with the Chelsea model, I think the one thing we're missing, though, is their first team was stockpiled, and they had no problem going out and signing marquee signings. So, they could also go and stockpile the sort of talent, whereas, like, we're bringing in the talent to support the first team. You know what I mean? It's like there's not a massive benchmark. Some of them are already stepping straight in because there's not a massive benchmark, which shows the quality of your first team isn't good enough. It needs to be dragged to a certain standard. You drag them to a certain standard. You give these boys a much better chance of developing and becoming top players. And I think that's the problem we're missing with the Chelsea model. They had no problem supplementing the first team with star players.
Yeah.
I think the thing is, though, Dave, I get your point, but Spurs' biggest failure is the failure to produce a conveyor belt of talent over years and years and years. We don't want.
We say that, though, Johnny.
No, we have, right? Honestly, but we're nowhere near. Dave. With the greatest respect, we're nowhere near you know, some of the clubs. I mean, if you saw half the players that have been on our doorstep, I'm talking about selling players that aren't look at Arsenal, look at Chelsea, right? Alex Iwobi, Nketiah, Smith Rowe. I could just go on and on and on. 30 million here, 35 million here, 25 million there, right? They have a little dabble, have a little bit of work, and they're gone. And Chelsea the same. And what's happened is the ones that don't are still good, but they're not top, but still good enough to get the money. These signings supplement the bigger signings. They're the ones that pay. I mean, you're looking at Chelsea, they're going, oh, you know, I spent all this money. Well, no, actually, they haven't. Chelsea have sold 50 million here, 40 million there. And you add that all up, and that's it balances the book. The other thing we seem to keep forgetting, apart from someone like Dean Huijsen, who was like hot sauce this season, most defenders don't really start to come into their own till they're about 24, 25. I mean, we talk about defenders reaching their sort of peak, 26, 27. And here we are, you know, judging someone like Phillips or some of these other players like Dorrington, 19, 20 years of age. I think it's early. Huijsen is an exceptional centre-back. I think there's so much growth in all of these right now. It's which one will we see the greatest growth? And that for me is where Thomas Frank is exceptional. His development of players. We saw someone like Nathan Collins, for example, who was absolute dog poo, right, when he first came into the team. And he's unremarkable. And if Spurs signed someone like Nathan Collins, there'd be absolute uproar. But his aerial command aerially and his performances for a team as bad as Brentford have been, you know, they don't have an incredible team. He's been one of the standout players. And you look at someone like
in an Ireland jersey, absolutely atrocious.
Well, I'm just telling you, right, how he's been, right? Go and ask any Brentford fan how he's been.
No, look, don't get me wrong.
We could say the same about half the England squad, Dave, in this. In the England games.
I get what you mean. Look, I think Collins is
I'm just saying his development. Look, Pinnock, right, came from Forest Green. Okay, he's come from non-league football.
Yeah, and but Brentford have time to develop them. They're playing down the bottom half of the Premier League.
I'm just saying, it doesn't matter where you are. It's still about developing the players.
I get that, and I have no problem developing players. But where my problem comes in, Johnny, is, you know, we've had one of the most successful academy teams ever at this football club come true. They're all being fanned out on loan while we're signing players coming in, you know, of the same age, coming straight into the first team, getting their opportunity while our academy players are. And where my problem comes in is that 5 million, that's going to matter. That is going to matter in this transfer window. And the reason why I say that is because we know how notoriously tight Spurs are. They're not like other clubs where they'll go out and go, okay, no problem, we'll pay what we need, what you want, because we need them in here. Spurs will try and rinse every penny. I have no problem when it works to a large degree, but it doesn't work. We don't get these signings over the line. But this 5 million will count. You know, we'll go, well, we can't pay that because we need to take 5 million out.
Dave, it doesn't come like, come on, you know it doesn't go like that. It's the same as massive. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. You
know how this board operates, Johnny. You know they count every penny. Let's not pretend it don't.
Yes, but Dave, they don't do it like that. Come on, they don't go. They haven't played Matthias Tell. They haven't paid a penny for Matthias Tell because Bayern Munich owes a fortune, right? We just got 17 million in for Pierre Højbjerg, right? And we will not be paying 5 million. There's no way that Spurs are paying 5 million up front for the Jap. Right? Not a chance, right? It'll be paid, no doubt, over 3 or 4 years, that £5 million. I can guarantee you that's not going to burn a hole in. What burns a hole in finances is when you have to sack a manager and pay off all their staff millions and millions of pounds. That's burning money. That's what we've done. That's wasting money. I don't think a player like this is wasting money, nor is paying £2 million for Ashley Phillips. Or £12 million.
Do you know what, Johnny? This is the thing. I heard this last year when we brought in Bergvall, Gray, players like that, because everyone was sitting there going, well, we still have time. The marquee signing's coming. Did it come?
No, but I didn't mention marquee signings. I'm
No,
just
but
saying.
this is my point I'm getting to. We say that this, it's a smart investment, but if we think this isn't going to affect us signing, another player or marquee signing down the line, of course it is, because we know how this board operates. They're tight with the money at the end of the day. I don't mind it to a certain degree, but the reality is, I want both, but we didn't get both last summer. Last summer, I heard all of this, when we were signing all these young talent. I was sitting there, 31st of August, when that window closed. Where was the marquee sign that was going to move the needle?
Dave, I can't disagree, mate. Dave, I can't disagree with you. What I'm saying is, let's not shoot now. I'm saying to you,
no, I agree.
If that window closes on the 1st of September, and all the talk is excuse my French, is in hollow, right? I'm there, man. I'm there. I'm marching down the street with you, because
no, I get you.
I'm not having it. I'm not having it. 30 non-football events, right? As opposed to 6. No European football, right? The year before, where we only 4% down. This year, we're going to have Champions League football. Champions League football, which is immeasurably different to the financial benefit than what it was in 2019 when we were there. The bonuses for winning the Europa League from our sponsors, the bonuses for being in the Champions League from our sponsors, right? Money, right? This is the first time we've had 30 events. It's the first time we've been in the Champions League for a considerable amount of time. Yeah. There is no excuse whatsoever not to be spending the money in this window. And if it comes to pass, when that bell goes and you see on Sky Sports, that's it. There's no more. And we have not bought a marquee signing, a player that makes us go unbelievable, whether it's a Bueno or an Eze or a Semenya. For me, it'll just be the two. Semenya doesn't make me go amazing. What's name makes me go amazing. The other two do. Unless it's someone like that, or a Hato from Ajax, or a Hincapié, or a Monster 6 like Douglas Luiz, or someone like João Pedro, something like that. I'm not getting excited, and I'm going to be as mad, if not madder than you. So I totally get where you're coming from, but I just think right now we're getting frustrated. Let's see what happens 1st of July when that bell goes, and if we don't start getting signings in, and Thomas Frank doesn't get the assets that he deserves for a manager that's just come in, all hell's going to break loose, and the internet's going to melt.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like Johnny's saying just hold your horses. Let's get to Dermatron saying, hiya. Thank you, Dermatron. Good to see you in the house, sir. And he's also saying we need a better window than last season. Big up, lads, and come on, you Spurs. Jason Bell replied to Dermatron saying we need 2 to 3 players who can walk into the starting 11. I think that's Dave's point, is that when is that going to happen? When are we going to start seeing rumors of those guys that we know are going to be the real players that can step into the first team, be the big name quality players that we know have been proven and will be able to raise the actual levels, of this team, so that Thomas Frank doesn't go down a similar path, to previous managers. Just quickly, one last little comment on, maybe just the impact of this signing. Does anyone think that Spurs could in fact be playing a back 5 going into this next season? Is that why we might be stockpiling so many center backs? Is Thomas Frank might end up playing a back 5? Because that didn't go down too well with previous managers, with their relationship with the fans. Nuno, everyone was saying he can't play a back 5 like he did at Wolves. He was forced into a back 4. Antonio Conte's back 5 was always ridiculed and always described as boring. Will Thomas Frank, go down a similar path and try to do a back 5, or will he mix between the two? Just a quick comment on that if anyone wants to come in.
Go on.
Go on, Johnny.
No, listen, look, I think...
Are we stockpiling center backs for a back 5, Johnny?
Thomas Frank is going to have a fluid system, okay? You'll see him maybe play... You'll see it transition during the game. Look, we're so used to saying, right, that's the system and that's the end of it, right? You're not going to see that with this guy, right? You're going to see systems change in the game. Listen, I've been following Brentford for quite a long time because a certain player that I've been following for a friend, and I've watched them. I wouldn't watch them ordinarily as much as I have done, but because of this. And I watch them one week and I'm watching the game and I'm thinking, well, hang on a minute. what? He's not playing there this way. Where's it? Hang on, the systems. What's he done? And I'm sitting there trying to work it out. And then just as I've got to work it out that it's different to the last time, they revert back to how we were playing the week before. So I think you'll see transition of formation in game as well. But I do think there is a chance that he could play 3 at the back. It's not out the realms of possibility. We know Ruben Amorim's going to be playing 3 at the back. So, it's not like it's, revolutionary. So why not?
I just wonder, though, Johnny, the fact that Frank sort of, because I do think he surprised a few people when he, I'd hear that Tottenham fans do want to entertain, they do want to be possession-based, and that he is going to play a bit more attack. And I wonder, does that maybe throw that, fluidity, or to a degree, maybe that back 5 out of the window a little bit? Look, I think it's interesting. I think, there'll be time and a place for back 5 over the course of the season. But, look, at the end of the day, I don't mind stockpiling. Like I said, Ashley Phillips, Darlington, they don't have to be registered. They can still play. They give you extra squad depth if needed. And at the end of the day, they don't just have to be training with the senior team. If they're not needed for the senior team, let them play the under-21 games. There's more than enough academy football to go around to keep these guys on their toes, keep them playing and stuff like that. So I'm not really too worried about the stockpile of the talent and stuff like that. But it'd be interesting. I think at the end of the day, if Thomas Frank wants that fluidity, if you're going to register that squad, or you're planning that squad, you ultimately going to plan it with the 3 centre backs, as your main option. Because if you don't, and you want to switch to a back 3, that's where the problem comes in, if you don't have enough centre backs to carry it. So if they're registering the squad, they'll be planning to register it for a back 3 system, and then that way you can switch it up to back 4s with stuff like that. So look, it'd be interesting. I think it's certainly interesting. But at the end of the day, Vescovic, Phillips, Dorrington, Takai, any of them come in, it's a huge risk. Do you know what I mean? But I would say you've got Romero, Van de Ven, Danzo, Dragusin ahead of them. So, there's plenty of talent at centre back now. Now let's go and fucking start signing in other areas that are actually badly needed.
Sam, did you ever have problems with the back 5 of an Antonio Conte? How would Thomas Franks be any different if he does go with that?
I think that these, back 5 formations kind of get a bit of a bad rap as being just defense. And I think that we need to at least give Frank time if he's going to play a back 5, a back 3, etc. We need to give him time to actually get it fleshed out, because the immediacy of it might be a defensive 5 or it might be a defensive 3. And I think that fans need to show patience. Something that the club always asks of us, which I think is a liberty. But I'm only saying that because I feel like Frank deserves the time to try and get his system on.
Sam, I think your internet's breaking up a little bit there. Maybe. Might have you back.
My bad.
You're back now.
I think you.
Am I
try
back?
again. Yeah, try again.
I'm sorry, that kind of threw me for what I was saying.
No, it's all right. I mean, we were just talking about whether you had issues with the back 5 in the past, and
no, I
fans
don't.
will echo those sentiments, again.
Yeah, look, ultimately, I think that the end of the Conte era was, it culminated in a point where I was actually just so sick of watching us play. But if we can have like a fluidity and if in games where we need to play a back 5, we play the back 5, and games that we don't. Unlike that Everton game where we randomly played the back 5 that made no sense. But yeah, look, I think that ultimately, I think people will be excited by Frank's constantly changing up, because you'll actually be having to guess the lineup, and not just the lineup, the actual way that he sets it out, which I think that fans will enjoy.
Yeah, I don't think Thomas Frank will be married to one system or another. I think we'll actually see him kind of rotate between a back 4 and a back 5, depending on the opponent, or really just maybe depending on what he has available to him. Let's say we do have an injury-ridden season again, he might switch back towards a back 5, just to shore things up, or depending on where he has more depth really in the squad. Hollywood Hotspur saying, I think the signing of a 20-year-old is primarily a way to add to the roster without violating the club-grown UEFA rules. Johnny, I mean, do you think there's, kind of just, I think it shows that they must really rate the guy if he's being brought in and he's not actually going to qualify as homegrown or club trained or anything like that. It does show that they do have confidence that this guy is probably going to be in some way involved this season. Even Alistair Gold went as far as to say that he's not necessarily a signing for the future. In a way he is, because he's young, but he alluded to the fact that he will be playing in the first team and that he will be trialed out in that first team squad at some point during this preseason and maybe even throughout this year. So maybe it's like a Bergvall signing, someone that is very young, very talented, of course, has a lot of development to go, but they think he's capable of making that big step up from a, let's say, nowhere near the same level of a league like Bergvall did with Djurgården.
No, he's not. But I mean, when I look at Takai per 90 versus the rest of the J League, right? Interceptions first, possession won and lost first, pass completion percentage first, forwards pass completion first, long pass accuracy first, pass completion to the final third first, goals scored first, headed goals first. What more can you ask for? That's against his peers in the J League. Now, in the Japanese league. So obviously, when you say it like that, well, that's the Japanese league. Obviously, that's the point. But he can only play and do what he's up against, right? There's no guarantee that he's going to do it here. But listen, when we think Japanese, we think of some guy who's like 5'7", all right, who's like bowing all the time, right? This guy's 6'4", right? He's well built. I mean, when you look at someone like Tomiyasu, for example, look, they say he's the best defender to come out of Japan in years and years and years, right? And that's why we paid the most for him. Tomiyasu, if he hadn't have had all these injuries, okay, he would have been a really good player. He's still a good player. I mean, he can play right centre back. He can play right back. He's a good player. He doesn't look your average Japanese player. He's well built. And I think we're stereotyping a bit here.
I was saying to Jack before he came on, just in general, you look at Japan in across sports in general over the last, number of years. They're actually a nation coming to the forefront. They're producing, a lot of athletes out of there at the minute. So look, I'm not a problem with that. I think what Hollywood Hotspur is more getting at is, will this guy take up a squad place on the Premier League and the Champions League squad registration? He will definitely have to be ready for Champions League football if in the squad, if he wants to play. Premier League might be slightly different, but I'm almost sure, again, he would have to be registered in the Premier League squad. So he will fill up a roster space. If he's not, then he can't play for the senior squad. I don't think so. Your only other option is to loan him out. But I do think he takes up a roster spot, Hollywood Hotspur, especially in Champions League.
What we don't know is, I mean, Thomas Frank has just arrived, okay? He hasn't had one day of pre-season training. Let him get in there with Cochrane and Cochrane's top coach. Let them get in there. Let them see what they've got and let them decide. They might decide that, you know what? Kid's got loads of talent, but he's a year away, right? I might want to keep him around a bit. He can play in the under-21s and play in the odd game in the Carabao Cup, but in all, he's nowhere near ready yet. Dorrington needs to go out on loan, and the only one I'm going to keep here is Phillips and Vuskovic, right? That might be the case, and then it's a non-conversation, or it might be some other way around. But one thing's for sure, Mickey van der Ven will be injured, Romero will be injured, Ben Davies will be injured, right? And that's why, we got to get out of this sort of narrow, blinkered look that everyone's going to be fit for the whole season, right? And a lot of these players aren't even going to get game time. And that's forgetting Danso, and that's forgetting Dragusin. It's almost like a centre-back file we've got now.
Yeah. I think we can now move on to, so the Eze conversations, here and whether we believe in them or not. Thanks to Hollywood Hotspur. Thanks to Dermatron for all the support. Thanks to everybody that's in here with us. I think in total, we're getting close to around 440 in the house. So everybody, please, again, smash a like, get into the comments. If you want to interrupt the show at any point, feel free to do a Dermatron or Hollywood Hotspur as done here. We get to you straight away. And then thanks to anybody that's just been listening to this conversation this whole time, seeing a lot of feedback in the comments. But let's get straight into the Eze conversations. According to Sam Tabito, who reports for Standard Sport, he covers Fulham, West Ham, Brentford, Crystal Palace, basically all the teams that aren't Tottenham or Arsenal. And he's saying that Spurs are turning their attention to Crystal Palace star Eberechi Eze as Thomas Frank looks to make a statement signing this summer. We were here before, Dave. We were led to believe that Spurs would make a big statement signing last season with the likes of an Eze or someone else. Do you think it actually could happen this summer, or are we just being tricked again, by maybe some of the ITK journalists and some of their leaks and feelings with Eze, as well, qualifying for Europa League, Crystal Palace? Do you think he actually want to leave?
Look, I think there will be a part on Eze's part that he'll want to leave and progress his career. I think if he gets to one of the top 6 clubs, sort of cements his place in the England squad. And what I really like about Eze, actually, when you actually watch him in that England squad, he sort of has that little bit of difference, that little bit of flair, compared to maybe some of the other players around him. Huh? Swagger, exactly. Yeah. He does he doesn't play it safe like some of the others. He sort of goes out there and plays with his freedom, regardless of, because it's very easy if you get called up to the England squad just to sort of start playing safe and everything else. It's very easy to fall into that trap. He hasn't done that. I really like that about Eze. And from stuff that I've read and stuff like that, I believe his preference is to stay in London, around his family rather than, move to like some Manchester and that. And to be honest, look, it's been a pretty simple deal for Tottenham to do, to be honest. It's Crystal Palace. You put in the bid, he's going to sign on the dotted line. We're pissing about with it, to be quite frank. And look, last summer, it was Neto, Conor Gallagher, it was Eze. Any of them arrive? Any of them sign on the dotted line?
No.
None of them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's my fear again around this summer. It's sort of like you're going to have all these links, but, there was no links to Takai. All of a sudden, he signs on the dotted line. I'm sort of starting to see the same repetitive things. Last January, we took Timo Werner in on loan, didn't come in and solve a problem. Took him in for the next season. Last season, brought Tell in January, didn't really solve a problem. Went and signed him on a permanent to try and solve issues at the squad. You know what I mean? And for me, this is the whole broad problem with it. When are we actually going to start getting in the market and signing these players? We sit here and make all the excuses. There's time, everything else. Okay, Liverpool have signed theirs. Man City have signed theirs. United have signed theirs. Chelsea have signed theirs. Then the next thing, and I'm just getting fed up with it. Instead of being rumoured, because all the links today is, Tottenham are looking. Tottenham are interested. Yeah, why wouldn't he be on Tottenham's radar? It's such an obvious thing. If he's not on most Premier League clubs' radar, then, it's absolutely madness. But you don't see Tottenham pursuing, Tottenham putting in bids. And it's really pissing me off. It's simple. If you want the guy, go and get the fucking deal done. Don't leave him out there like a paper bag in the wind and attracting interest from here, there, and everywhere else. Go and get your business done. It's absolutely mind-boggling. I'm fed up with it. Eze is a player that will walk in here. Look at the way he performed for Aston or Crystal Palace in the league last season. You go back to the 2 big games in the FA Cup. Aston Villa destroyed them. Man City destroyed them. This is a player that will walk into this squad, and you're after losing. You're about to lose Son. You've lost Harry Kane. They were big time players who stepped up in big games and consistently across the season. Eze for me is another one of them. When the big game comes around, you can guarantee he's going to step up and have an effect. They're the sort of signings we need to be making that you put into this team to really drag the level up. So, look, I would love him here, but the reality is Tottenham have had time to do this deal before and never did. And I also question, with James Maddison in the team, I'm sure they'll both be competing for a similar position. I know Eze is a bit more versatile, but, will James Maddison throw his toys out the pram? As he already said to Tottenham, you can't sign Eze because we're both competing for the England squad, this, that, and the other, in similar positions and stuff like that. So if I'm looking at that situation, no, I don't think it's going to happen.
I mean, we've been here before, Sam and Johnny, right? Especially with Eze. We were led down this path last summer and it never ended up happening.
And it's just rubbish, monitoring, observing, interested in, I mean, just list them out. Lazy, shitty journalism. Can't be bothered with it, right? You want to listen up to that clickbait. Listen, look, at Football Inc., that I do with Sean. Yeah, I mean, we read out these, a lot of the stories that are coming out, for all the clubs. And some of them maintain, like we've got our Eze, Man United have got their Brian and Buemo, Liverpool have got their Quansah or the Canate or whatever. So every club has got a said player that's either staying, leaving, might be going, or we might be signing. But the problem with us is, as Spurs fans, we've heard this for so long. Eze's a game changer. We've got nobody in our team that can pick up a ball when we're not winning the game in a low block, pick up the ball, the edge of the D, drop his shoulder, bang, bottom corner, right? We haven't had anyone really like that since Gareth Bale. Okay, game changer. Maddison is a good player, but he's not game changer. He can run a pass, he can do a nice shot. I'm not saying any of that. But as Dave said, he single-handedly won the quarterfinal, the semi-final, and the final. He's just he's a game changer. Out of nothing. You can't shackle him. He can play out on the left. He can drift in onto that D. You got to watch him. But what's happened when you're watching him? If he's drifting in and you've got players tracking him, what you're doing, you're creating space for others to exploit. We don't have anyone like that. And the thing is, if this board had any idea as to what this fan base wants and it could read the room, this is the one signing, Eze is the one signing that can unite the fan base and have them all salivating and excited as to what's coming this season. They ain't interested in Carlos Kickerball or anyone you got to Google. I mean, I know a lot of players and I follow a lot of players. There's another one I've been following at Club Bruges for the last few weeks. Fantastic player, but we need the big players. We need the big ones. The fans are fed up with it. And no disrespect to Semenya, but Semenya okay, but he ain't the level of Mbeumo and Eze. Sorry, he's just not. And if we're prepared to pay 70 million for Semenya, but we're not prepared to pay the 65 million. And let's be honest, it's 3 installments, guys. Even if it's 3 installments over 3 windows, 20 million a window. Come on, look at the crap we bought and spent over 30 million. Surely he's worth 20 million over 3 transfer windows to have that game changer. And look how many points that's going to be. Trying to mark him and Dom Solanke and the rest, and Matthias Tell. Honestly, he's the signing the fan base needs to lift. And it's the fan base, it's the signing that the club needs and Thomas Frank needs. And if they don't deliver it, there's going to end up being a bloody riot. We don't want some guy who they found in Afghanistan, Kazakhstan, or wherever he comes from, right, that they found for £12 million, right? He might turn out to be great, but, listen, everyone's interested in Eze. Man City, Arsenal, why wouldn't you be? Bayern Munich. Who remembers Elise and Eze playing together at Crystal Palace? Yeah. They were unstoppable when they were both fit. So everything's possible. Unfortunately, right now, it ain't happened. My cousin Vinny, my mate Vinny. They need to get the money out, get the wallet out.
Yeah, you need to have a conversation with Vinay for sure. Paul Connor, member for 22 months as an elite member. Thank you for the longevity of support, Paul. Reached in 2 years as well, sir. It's been good to have you with us, man. He's saying, for me, guys, we need Eze as a Kulu is out injured and Matters is out till at least the start of the season. We need Eze to be our creative player, and nothing wrong with Matters and Eze starting in the same team. That was a conversation from last summer, right? Can you fit in Eze, Kulusevski, Maddison all into the same team? I was of the belief that you can, but also I think with Eze is that he is in that quality where he creates, but he also can score, which is what Sonny, I think, used to be like, Harry Kane used to be like, and that's what I think the top players can do. Top players can create and score for their teams. They can be able to do both, whereas plenty of times at Spurs, especially maybe this last season, felt like we have a lot of guys who maybe excel in one area, but don't necessarily excel maybe in another, where we do need someone that's more the complete package. I think Eze does happen to be one of those. He can play down the middle, or he can play on the wing as well. I'd even say he's good enough to play on any side of the wing. It doesn't really matter. If you're good enough, you can play pretty much anywhere. And I think Eze is one of those guys, in the way that he can carry Crystal Palace, like Dave said, in the final as well as the semifinal by creating and scoring for his team. I think he'd be able to thrive at Tottenham Hotspur. And also, even with Thomas Frank, who plays a bit more defensive too, he's shown that he can do that with Oliver Glasner. At Crystal Palace, he's a guy that can work hard for the team, muck in defensively. I think he'd be a wonderful signing. He'd probably be one of my favorite signings ever, really, of the last few years.
Exactly.
Exactly.
You feel like that. Dave feels like that. I feel like that. And that is multiplied across the fan base. Normally, signings are so divisive. I don't want him. I don't rate him. And I want this guy. And I can't believe we've signed him, even when your best mate wanted him. But this is one player who, I would say 80% of the fan base would take the drop of a hat.
Yeah. I think it's the one, like Dave would say, it's the one that you wake up with a stiffy in the morning with type of signing. Thank you again, Paul.
Anyway, but that's,
we can fit them all into the same team, though, right? That's what Paul was saying, too, so that you can fit them all into the same team, but also, with the loss of Kulusevski and Maddison in the beginning of the season, those are two creative players that Frank is actually going to be without, so you do need to bring in someone like an Eze, just so that we at least do have one creative player to pick from.
I don't think that you actually need to fit them all in the same team. As long as, playing
3 games a week, lad, isn't it?
That's what I'm saying. You'll probably play 2 of them in the Premier League and 2 of them in the Champions League, and the other ones on the bench. The rotation will be important. Plus, it also depends on how Thomas Frank evaluates Kulusevski. If he decides, I want you to play on the wing, or if he wants him to play in the middle, which obviously we'll have to wait and see. I feel like he'll want Kulusevski in the middle, because I feel like we'll want pace on the wings, which unfortunately Kulusevski does not really have. But I think, Eze on the left and Maddison in the middle with a Bergvall or, a Bentancur, whoever we bring in or Frank decides to play, with the ability to, switch out Maddison for Kulusevski, vice versa, and maybe you've got someone else that can go on the wing and Eze comes in the middle, or if you want to, overload it, you bring on all 3 of them and, basically just play with your monster 6 that we're all praying we're going to get. So look, I think that Eze will be a very exciting signing. I think he just seems, I feel like a lot of things I look for in players is the personality as well. And he just seems like such a genuinely nice guy. And when you're saying, Arsenal are looking at him, it's like, I just don't want to hate him like I hate Saka.
Yeah.
I don't even hate Saka. It seems like a nice kid as well, but he's in the book. What can you do?
Can I throw another?
Yeah.
So I was going to say, could I throw another spin on it? If Palace sell Guehi for big money, is there going to be a need to sell Eze then? So are Tottenham maybe, under time constraints to sort of get that one done before someone does for Guehi?
But the money that Liverpool were offering for Guehi, or that I've seen that they're supposedly offering, is only 30 million. And I'm seeing Crystal Palace fans going absolutely insane, saying things like, you sold Gerald Quansah for 30 million. You're trying to sell Joe Gomez, who's injured and 28, for 30 million. And you're trying to sign, the most consistent England defender since the start of the Euros. And a Premier League captain of the last 2 years who's 25, and you're offering 30. I mean, it's kind of how we're looking at the.
He only have 1 year left on his contract, though, so that automatically brings.
I know, but it's the homegrown thing, though, Dave, as well. It's like Yeah, 30
Yeah, I
million,
get
is that with English tax? Are they saying that he's only worth like 15 and it's the
But didn't
15
they only
million
turn
English
down
tax?
62 million from us last January as well, didn't they?
So I think I read or something that Newcastle offered like 70 million last January.
Yeah.
So it is odd to see, or maybe it was in the summer, I can't remember. Maybe it is strange that they would have turned it down, but they're probably looking at it. I know that Gahey's not Harry Kane, but they're looking at Harry Kane, English 31-year-old
Yeah.
English player, like as in Lions player, and we got 100 million euros for him. So they're probably thinking, we can hold out for at least 50 here. And bearing in mind that they've managed to keep Gahey for another season, they won a trophy. They could have taken the 70 or 65 million that was offered by us and Newcastle, but as I said, they kept him for that extra year, and they've done well because of it. So it is interesting to see what's going to happen with Gahey, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very good question. If one of them goes, are they really going to be that inclined to sell the other? Because they also are going to be in the Europa League, so they have a bit more, I think, an ability to convince, whichever players that, they still have left to stick around for at least one more season. Give those Crystal Palace fans, something to look forward to instead of selling all of your best players and then go into a Europa League campaign. That would be crazy. Be something Spurs would do.
If they can get 100+ million for Eze and Gahey, though, that goes a long way for them. They've still got some decent players in there, and 110 million to build a squad. A decent number of sort of 30 million pound players. That's going to do wonders for them, right?
Yeah, I just wonder how that goes down with the fan base, though. I agree that is a lot of money, but how does that go down with those Crystal Palace fan base? Those were the two guys that carried them to that final. Yeah, like you're selling, kind of doing what Bournemouth are doing, and I think, I even worry for Bournemouth. They're selling all their best players. This season, will they be able to? Will they be able to build off of their last season? I'd be pretty impressive if they did, considering they've sold the spine of their team. K32, just a lot of love for Eze that I wanted to get into the house here. K32 just saying Eze is the signing we need. DJ AK, good to see you, Anthony, saying should have signed Eze after that smokescreen interview from the board if they were actually serious. But yet again, just Z's King Huddle saying Eze is your archetypal Spurs player, graceful, elegant on the ball. I'd love him to join.
Throwback Huddle. You should understand that. Your Ginolas, your Hoddles, your Waddles, just Spurs.
Eze taking the number 7 after Sonny would ignite the fans, says Multi-Channel. I think it would. I think he is an excellent Sonny replacement if that is going to happen this summer. Luke Linton saying he'll take on more people in the 1v1s than our wingers put together. Brings the ball up the pitch as well, more than anyone. That's another thing. That's why I felt like he would have been. I know some people disagree that he wouldn't have suited Ange's system. I think he would have, because he is a guy that knows how to take players on. He can take it down the byline. He can take it inside. He knows how to pick pass as well, and he can score. I just think he is more or less kind of the complete package. And what I do like about Eze is that he's worked in very defensive-minded teams and has found a way to still create, found a way to still score. If he was playing in a slightly more attack-minded team, I think he would really flourish, for me personally. Morlar saying we've been talking for years. His agents' offices are at our facilities. Even if an agreement has been in place, it might be held up until July 1st for PSR reasons. I think Johnny was kind of alluding to that, that we are going to have to wait until that financial year is over, and then hopefully we start making those bigger moves.
Do you know what? Do you know what annoys me about this, though? You don't see the other clubs that we're trying to compete with just holding off for PSR, and whenever the things come around, they just find reasons and ways out of it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Paul Connor saying Eze also helps out with our English quota as well as for the Champions League. 100% right there, Paul.
Yeah.
Jerome coming in. Good to see you, Jerome, saying this stinks of the same nonsense of last summer. We are interested in all the big names, but again, getting a kid from the J League under 23s. Alanga is a fraud and will fail. Frank. The thing is, Dave was kind of alluding, Jerome, to the fact that you're signing guys all of a sudden kind of out of nowhere again, whereas previously under Paratici, there would be links here, kind of bits and pieces here and there. We had maybe a clue or an idea about maybe who we might get in. But with Johan Lange, it's just been radio silence. And I even said to Dave, as well as others last summer when we were doing these types of shows, that it's almost kind of like some of the Spurs journalists kind of got exposed a little bit for kind of just putting out a lot of fake rumors, because all the ones that Johan Lange brought through the door, there was pretty much no mention of, those names until basically like the day or two before we got an actual here we go or something from Fabrizio Romano. They kind of came out of nowhere. Whereas when Paratici was leading the charge, kind of had like a vague idea of, maybe where Spurs were looking and what they might have been after. With Johan Lange, these signings just kind of seem to come out of nowhere, which is fine if that's how he wants to operate. But I wonder if we're going to get the same thing here, because Takai, again, a guy that just no one was had any clue that was going to happen, sort of came out of nowhere.
Well, for me, the big problem is, and the big difference between Johan Lange and Paratici is Paratici signed players for the first team and young players. This guy is just majority signed young players. That's all he's done since he's got here. He brought in Solanke last year to try and improve the first team. I mean, it was always destined for fucking set up for failure. When we come round to the January transfer window, the only player they actually brought in that was actually going to affect the first team was Danzo. And why did he do it? Because he's got experience behind him. They're the only two players over the last 2 windows that he's actually brought in ready to go here and now to try and hit the ground running. It's not good enough. It's nowhere near good enough. And if you want me to be honest, I can go back to the previous January when we had injuries. He brought in fucking Werner and Radu Dragic in. Nowhere near good enough. This is my problem with him. At least Paratici, he's responsible for Romero, Van de Ven, half of that team that you see out there. Madison, players like that. Was signing young players and stuff like that. This guy doesn't have the ability to do that. He's a fraud. He needs Paratici to come in and hold his hand.
Johnny, I know we only have you for so much longer. Just a quick question on Lange. Yeah. Do you think Paratici is going to be pulling the strings this summer, or is it going to be Lange?
Well, his contract's to the end of August. So
who's really in charge? Who's really pulling the strings this summer, do you think?
Did you say Lange's contract is up?
No.
Paratici's
is up at the August. He's the contract he's currently on, which is his consultancy contract. Doesn't mean he's not going to stay. Listen, look, left field. Listen, Douglas Luiz, we need a 6. Douglas Luiz is at Juventus. Yeah. Hasn't had a great season there. I still think he's a top player. We know he's proven. Come in, bring him in for a reasonable fee. Maybe he's going to ignite our window. We'll know when we see exactly when we see a Fabio deal, won't we, Dave? We'll know straight away.
100%, because it'll be structured, the way Daniel Levy loves it, and it'll be a player of experience, that can come in and try and hit the ground running. That'll be the massive difference with it. Look, the thing is with Tottenham, they can't, to a certain degree, like Paratici can't actually go and negotiate deals for Tottenham. He can't be seen to do any work for Tottenham. He can only be seen to advise Tottenham. So if Tottenham do go about and he is in the background doing this, that, and the other, they're only going to ban him again. They're going to look for any excuse to ban him again. So he has to keep his nose clean. So technically, he can't actually get his hands on this transfer window until his ban is up.
I agree with Johnny saying we kind of know when a Paratici deal is in the cards versus maybe a Lange deal. This one with Takai kind of stinks more of a Johan Lange deal than it really does of a Paratici one.
Yes, it stinks of a deal where he's gone to a Japanese restaurant, he's having a nice bit of sushi, and someone's leant over and said, "My cousin knows a guy who knows a guy." Have you seen?
It's
this
more
guy?
The fact that it's out of nowhere.
He's run the numbers in the data room. And listen, look. I'm a huge fan of Fabio, and make no bones about it. And I'm underwhelmed. Look, if he was a great director of football, like the club are trying to pitch Johan Lange, he wouldn't have been demoted by Aston Villa. Do we have greater ambitions than Aston Villa? Yes.
Aston Villa got rid of him to bring in Monchi so they could kick on.
Well, exactly, Dave. So, don't be selling me that he's the Messiah, because he ain't, right?
Yeah.
You got one guy who's been World Director of the Year award down in Saudi. He won that award, and he's been Director of Football for a club called Juventus for 10 years. Okay, all right. You don't stay at Juventus for 10 years, and if you're dog shit, this guy was 5 minutes at Aston Villa and he got demoted. Sorry, you ain't selling that. You ain't pitching that to me. I'm not a buyer.
Yeah. I mean, You also think about the fact that even Paratici, when Spurs were desperate, he was able to lure in Conte, mid-season. The guy does have, I think, a bit more pull than even Johan Lange does as
Do
well.
you
I think he's got
remember?
deeper connections.
Yeah, I mean, you remember when he bought in Bentancur and Kulu in that January transfer window, and everyone went, "Who the fucking are these players? Oh, this is like typical Spurs last
Didn't we
minute
sign Porro
deal."
in the January window?
I
as
found
well?
that to be a bit.
January?
I never agreed with when people are saying, "Who the hell are these guys?" Like if you had been watching any Serie A of the last 4 or 5
Yeah, but a lot of
seasons, you
people
knew who
haven't
those
watched
guys
Serie
were.
A, and
Yeah,
they were considered rejects because they came in on the cheap.
Yeah.
Bentancur, £15 million, 15 plus extras, 17 million euros. 17 million euros for Bentancur.
Imagine that.
35 million euros for Kulu, right?
Yeah.
They turned their nose up, and by the end of the year, they were salivating. So,
he brought in Romero when we had Nuno
Correct.
as the
Correct.
manager.
Correct.
The guy's got power. He's got pull.
Yeah.
Jerome saying, where is Paratici? People have been banging on how he will bring players that we need, but where is he? Archer kind of getting to you in the comments saying Paratici's ban ends on the 30th of June, so he should be able to start working officially on July 1st. We're getting rumors that he is expected to stick around, Jerome.
Yeah.
It's just that it's a bit awkward with the consultancy role that he's in right now. And then he also still has this like court, case situation that he still has to attend despite the ban, going up. So it's just, I think, all a little bit awkward at the minute, with Spurs. I think they want to bring him back, but they can't really officially do it until a certain date, this summer. But then we're already midway through the transfer window, which is probably why Johan Lange is still I think, still running the show to a degree, because Paratici technically can't, and Paratici won't be able to be given, I think, the reins until August is, what we're kind of being led to. So maybe we'll start to see the impact of Paratici again, like in January or maybe the following summer. So it might just have to be a hybrid sort of situation between Johan Lange and Paratici this summer. That's what I'm thinking about.
Or we could see a late flurry. Hopefully that's the case. Hopefully Daniel Levy's taking all the money from Johan Lange's, purse strings, and he's just holding it back for Paratici. Let's wait and see.
Yeah. Thank you for the support, by the way, Jerome.
Big up, Jerome. I do share the frustration, though, Jerome. I'm with you on that, man.
With definitely only love for Paratici here, man. And we have close to 350 in the house on YouTube, and then looks like close to 100 over on Twitter as well. So please, everybody, continue to run the likes up and get into the comments, please. If there's anything you feel like we're missing. I think we only have about one question left, and then I did put a late post in the post section for all the members in case you guys have any further questions that you want answered for after the show. Air saying we need more than just Eze. Go take him Bumo. He can still be reeled in. Imagine the link up between those two. Start thinking big, think long term. I think that was a conversation we might have had 1 or 2 weeks ago. People were saying bring in Eze, but bring in another big marquee signing, then Spurs fans will be overjoyed.
I would say to you, the best advice I can say to you is go back to your doctor, speak to him. Obviously, you've been messing around with your medication because that ain't
Do you know what, though? If
that shows
really
ambition.
Of course it shows ambition, but this is Tottenham Hotspur.
No, I get that, but I don't like that we sit here and go, "This is Tottenham Hotspur." I think at some point,
Dave, absolutely,
we got to stop looking to give them excuses. We got to start putting pressure on them to deliver, because at the end of the day, we're basically asking every manager to come in here, and it's already starting to happen with Thomas Frank. We want you to go and compete with Chelsea, Liverpool, Man City, teams like that with Poundland signings. Do you know what I mean? You're almost asking them to do the absolute impossible. And at the end of the day, if we're serious, and Daniel Levy said he wants to win the Champions League and Premier League, so he's put a definitive outcome on it. So that's what he's going to be held to. That's what the transfer window is going to be judged against. That's what everything's going to be judged against. And at the end of the day, signing players like this that come in, give you a couple of decent players in every position. We're going to be playing another 40 to 60 games, hopefully, next season. So the reality is, at some point, you're going to end up relying on the likes of Takai and people like that. But are they really going to be able to come in and compete and win new games? We've signed the likes of Radu Dragic from Italy, from Genoa. He couldn't come in and help us win games. He couldn't, you know what I mean? He helped contribute to it. So the reality is, the quality matters. If we really want to go and compete, and we want to allow Frank to be able to make changes, quality matters.
Think of that front line. Think of that front line.
These sort of players.
Yeah. Think about, Dave, how many times you or I, or as a Spurs fan, however old you are, you're thinking, this summer's going to be different. This January is going to be different. We've heard it all before. The last time we signed a marquee signing was Rafa van der Vaart. Look in your diaries. Look how long ago that was. We've heard it. We've seen it. They talk the talk. They never walk the walk. And this is it now, right? This is it. You've made a statement. You've opened your mouth. No one asked you to come out and say Champions League, Premier League. No one asked. No one asked you for it. Okay. Freedom to say what you wanted to say. Okay. You've declared it to the Spurs fans. If that window closes and you don't deliver any marquee signings, then all hell's going to break loose. That's all I can say.
It's already too late, though, because the window's closed. You got what you got till January. It's almost too late to start kicking up a fuss. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just think about that front line, though, Ace. If you had Mbumo, Solanke, and Eze with Johnson, Odebear, sort of guys that also still compete and kind of rotate in, I think that's kind of the type of front line that you start to really actually dream of, trophies and, pushing, much higher up the league. But if you only sign one of them, yes, it's definitely needed. But, I think Spurs, if they really were to show that ambition for what Daniel Levy's talking about, winning Champions Leagues, winning the Premier League, you would actually go out and try to sign both, or at least someone like that of that sort of proven
He's
quality.
going to try and turn Tell into Brian Mbeumo. Like I've said before, I've followed Brian Mbeumo for quite a considerable amount of time, and I've always really liked him. The problem was his finishing was shambolic. He used to get in front of the goal and panic and snatch at shots, and now he's a much more composed player. And what we can see with Matthias Tell, he's got the moves, he's got the pace.
True.
He's got a lot going for him. He's got a nice shot on him. Yeah. But again, his goals to game ratio,
snatches at chances too.
Is not good enough. And I think Thomas Frank will definitely be working on him, and he could be the surprise element of the season. Guys, I'm going to have to shoot. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thanks, Johnny.
Johnny.
Dave's obviously gone for a.
No, I'm here. I'm listening.
I was going to say, Johnny, you could be Matisse Tell's agent, though, with that sort of comment. If he's on the Mbumo path, you really sold him to me there. I'm really nodding my head.
I'm just saying that's what he will try to do.
Yeah, totally.
That's what he will try to do. Because let's be honest, he's got assets, but, he needs a lot of fine-tuning. But
give yourself a plug too, Johnny.
Yeah, okay. So that's me on Twitter, and I'm on Instagram and TikTok on Talking Tottenham 1882, and I have a channel with Sean called Football Inc., which will be on tonight around about 9 o'clock, where we just talk all things football transfers, all clubs, Spurs included, obviously. And that's going to be our channel for this year. It's doing very well. Thank you very much. So if you get time, click on that link. Head over to that and see more of me talking and rambling.
Well,
thanks for having me on, guys. Sam,
thanks as always, Johnny.
Johnny.
Dave, take care. Dave, I'll speak to you soon, buddy.
Yeah.
See you soon,
Enjoy
buddy.
your evening,
Have a good night, Johnny. Have a good
Thanks
evening.
everyone for listening. Cheers, buddy. Bye-bye.
Just as well, Fix NBA agreeing with Air Ace from earlier, saying, personally, if we were actually serious, we should do a double deal of Eze and Guehi for about 100 to 120 million in installments, the way that Levy likes it. Just my opinion, guys. I think a lot of people agree, especially if you could do it the Levy way. Future's Bright, Future's Lily White says, totally agree. We need more than just Eze. We need 3 big signings this summer if we are to actually push on. I think a lot of people are in that mode as well. Rain Man, member for 16 months, saying, loving the channel as usual. Keep together, folks, even if we all disagree. Come on, new Spurs.
Oh,
I think we're just in an awkward period, Rain Man, where we just, we're waiting for Spurs to start following suit like some of these other clubs. You have Liverpool, who've already made 3 huge moves. You have Manchester United, who basically have already signed, Cunha. They're looking to get in and Mbumo. Manchester City have already begun their kind of rejuvenation of the squad. Reinders, Cherokee, Ayet Nouri, and I think there's another club that we had listed in some of our questions here that have also made some big moves as well.
But Man United, Matheus Cunha. You had Liverpool.
I said that one.
Frimpong,
Chelsea, that was the one I was missing. Chelsea with Liam Delap, Bino Gittins, they're bringing through. They have the young Brazilian that's come through. And these are teams that we're all competing with, for the top 4. These are teams we're competing with. Dave wanted to mention, just domestically, but also the Champions League. They all have kind of the same aspirations that we should be having. And Daniel Levy, again, to use his words against him, he said, I want to be competing for the Premier League and the Champions League. Those clubs do as well. And they brought in already a lot of big signings, to give them that leg up, or to give them that hope, that dream that they can, in fact, achieve.
And the thing is, Jack, off the back of that, I've already heard all the excuses the last few days. They're in the Club World Championship. Okay, 2 of them ain't. You know what I mean? PSR window, we have to wait for the new financial year. Okay, well, they're not, and they're still going to find ways around to sign players. Man United was supposed to be broke. They just dropped 60 million on Cunha. Do you know what I mean? They always find ways around it. At Tottenham, we always make these excuses, but no other teams do. They just go and get the business done because they got aspirations. And at the end of the day, if we want to go and win, you got to be proactive about it.
Yeah.
Not reactive. And we're always reactive rather than proactive. And this is my big problem. You're already putting Thomas Frank behind behind all these other teams that we're expected to go and compete with next season, by not making these signings. I couldn't care that Fulham haven't made a sign, or teams like, I don't want to compete with them. It's embarrassing. I want to be up the top end competing with the big boys. So if that's where I'm going to compare Tottenham to, that's the mountain we've got to climb. And there's no excuse for it. Liverpool don't have the game-changing stadium we do. Yeah. Liverpool don't have fucking abseiling down the side of their stadium. You know what I mean? They don't have a go-karting track underneath it either, do they? You know what I mean? They don't have NFL games there. They don't have a load of concerts there. They don't have fucking the biggest boxing fights there. They don't have all this. Neither the Man City, neither the Man United, but we do. Yeah. So there's no excuse for it. There is absolutely no excuse for it. You want to go and compete, go and do the fucking business. It's pissing me off. I thought it was a bit cynical a couple of weeks ago where I said, part of me thinks that they signed Thomas Frank because under Ange Postecoglou, it was a given that we needed to sign 4 or 5 marquee, players ready to come in for the first team. And that, they brought in Frank for all these tactical stuff to try and match it up, with some of these youngsters they're bringing in. And, people said, Dave, you're mad. It's a conspiracy theory. Okay. Ben Davies on a 1-year contract, which means we ain't going to sign, another first team player across that back line to take him out. You brought in Matisse Tello. I agree. He's got potential, but is he going to score the goals and the assists that we need across a consistent basis to go and compete? It's a huge risk. And then they bring in Takai. You know what I mean? People say it's a conspiracy theory. And then also, and let's not forget, at the weekend, they announced 4 towers, to be built off the back of a stand as well. So sort of people say it's conspiracy theories, but you look out the windows panning out. And, my big problem is everyone else was signing players. We're pissing about, deciding, trying to get Frank out of Brentford. We went and paid the money in the end and the money for the coaching staff. Why didn't you do that a fucking week earlier, 2 weeks earlier, and then go and sign players? I'm sorry, they're running out of excuses. There is not anymore. Go and start getting the players.
Thanks for the support, a year of support, Rain Man, and hope to see you on the fan show this week as well, my friend. Hope to see you there with us, leading the conversation. We also had Iceman in the house. Good to see you, Ricky. Hopefully everything's keeping well with you. I'm seeing Brian Timlin joining us as well. Big up to you, Brian. But also so many good people in here. Trinidad as well. Good to see you, Trinidad. And then John Stokes, member for 40 months, saying, give me Gyökeres, Eze, and Mpumo, Paulinho. Bassie's got fine taste here, Johnny Stokes. But also thanks for hitting the 40-month mark, my man. Absolute crazy support that we've had over such a long time now. 40 months. Not even sure if Dave and I can even count that high, to be perfectly honest, man. It's a crazy amount of support. Thank you, John.
Sent me a nice cheeky link for the black jersey today. Nice and cheap. So I'm gonna get on it. Big one on that Johnny Stokes. But you know what, Jack? Just looking at that, Gyökeres, Eze, and Mpumo, Paulinho, you're already got aspirations of, okay, worst case scenario, we should be competing around top 4, but there's an element we can go and compete. We can hold our own in the Champions League. You could maybe sneak a domestic cup. So I agree. They're the sort of players that we need to be signing. Other clubs are doing it.
I'm worried about Gyökeres going to the likes of Arsenal. John Stokes looks like maybe they're kind of seizing their eyes on him at the minute. With Paulinho, he's actually kind of achievable just because he didn't end up playing very much at Bayern. I'm not sure whether it's worked out for him over there with Vincent Kompany. So he's technically available. And then with Fulham, I'm not really too sure about Calvin Bassey, whether he's actually available or not. But left-sided center back and someone that could back up the likes of Mickey Van de Ven a lot better than what Ben Davis would. That's for sure.
Was it him that was at Rangers? No, I think I'm getting him.
Yeah, he was at Rangers.
He was at Rangers. I was right. Yeah, I like Bassey. I like Bassey.
Good to see Artist T in the house as well. Hopefully you're doing okay, Artist T. I think we had just In a way, though, I think we kind of covered it, to be fair, though.
Yeah.
We were kind of talking about, do you feel like Spurs have been dragging their heels a
Kind
little
of
bit? But I
naturally
think,
came in.
yeah, I think it's just kind of come up every now and again, kind of throughout this show. So, I mean, Sam, did you have any final thoughts on anything before then we kind of, I guess, wrap this one up? Anything you feel like we're missing? Just kind of going to here is
I think Sam's frozen. Oh no, he's there.
frozen or maybe
You're
muted?
there, Sammy.
Yeah, sorry, I lost internet for a second.
I was saying, I think, we had one last question, which was, kind of about Spurs sort of dragging their heels maybe a bit this summer window, because of what all the other clubs have done, Chelsea, Man United, Liverpool, and Man City. But I feel like that's kind of come up in various ways, throughout the show. So it's almost like we've kind of answered the question already. So then I was kind of asking you if there's any final thoughts you might have had before we get to some of the members' questions, as we usually do at the end of the show.
Yeah, I'll just throw a bit of slight rebuttal at Dave, even though I kind of agree with him.
Mhm.
About the tinfoil hat conspiracy. I think, Dave, it's not quite as sinister as you think it might be. I think that ultimately they don't care about what we care about, right? They'll do sort of the bare minimum to appease us. They gave us scarves and flags for 3 games, and everyone's like, oh, what a touch by the club. I'm not saying it's not, like, and I've got those in my room, and I'll always keep them, but I just think that ultimately they're gonna do, or they were always gonna do whatever they were gonna do, right? It didn't matter if there was fan backlash. It didn't matter if we got a manager that didn't want whatever. It was going to happen. They just do what they want. So ultimately, I think that regardless of Ange or Frank being here, I think that we would have probably ended up with 90% of the same players, probably more. Maybe one player that's slightly more tailored to each's, philosophy.
Well, my point is, I think under Ange Postecoglou, no one would have accepted Takai coming in this summer. Nobody, because there was a realization you got to get in quality, and there would have been an urgency around it, if you get what I mean.
No, I do, but that's what I'm saying. I think ultimately they don't care. They're gonna sign whoever they want. I can't remember who I was listening to earlier that was saying about, Spurs when they came in. Spurs were looking at. We were looking at Tevez and Gary Cahill.
Yeah.
And we ended up with Ryan Nielsen and Louis Saha. I mean, like, that they don't care.
Sums it up. Yeah.
That's why I think is dangerous to try, to get all behind Eze, because there's a very high chance that it's not going to happen and we're going to end up with someone else.
No, I get that, but I don't think we shouldn't sit here and demand. Like, at the end of the day, they may not care, but us fans know what's good for our football club, and if we end up stopping demanding that, then we may as well roll over, start fucking having sporting events at the F1 tracks together, start abseiling together, organize day out events and everything else if you don't care. Do you know what I mean? At the end of the day, you should never stop demanding. We know what's best for our club.
Eddie saying we are setting Frank up for failure at the moment. Has he gone too soon here, Sam? Eddie?
I think Eddie's still, in pieces after his hero was relieved of his duties.
He's echoing the same sentiments, though, so it showed that maybe he's looking at them. I know you're giving him
busting his balls. Pause.
He's holding them to the same standard in a way. Spurs. He's not giving he's not giving Levy a pass. Now all of a sudden, now that Ange is gone, he's sort of just kind of holding Levy to the same standard.
I mean, ultimately, I think that, like, regardless, it should be held to the same standard, whether Ange was here or Frank was here. In terms of, obviously, like, it's slightly different what each manager has to achieve, but in terms of what we expect from the club, we've just won a fucking Europa League, excuse my French. Like, we shouldn't be sitting here, whatever it is, 24 days into the window, having not signed any first team improvements, and watching big players, and I'm sure players that would have been on our list because I think that they were all achievable at some point. You know, it's definitely damaging for us to watch that, knowing that even though we won, United can still attract Cunha, for example.
Yeah.
And, you know, if rumors are to believe, the young Swedish kid who's been twerking for us for like 3 seasons, who's going to Barca, apparently he rejected us. So it's like, yeah. It's obviously, you know, a lot of this stuff is just media speculation and whatever, and rumors and hearsay, I guess. But the sentiment is the same. The club need to basically get a move on now. I'm sure that there is stuff going on in the background. I think that's what a lot of us have to kind of try to remember, because as you say, we signed this Takai guy literally out of nothing, out of nowhere. So we might just, you know, you might finish a stream and all of a sudden, you know, you've just uploaded and Eze's announced.
That'd be great.
Look,
it feels like Spurs were on the back foot, though, from the beginning by taking so long to decide over the Ange decision. You know, like they could have just, I mean, they were clearly just milking, as they should, I guess, to a degree. They were just milking as much from the winning the Europa League as they could. But then if they really did have the plan to sack Ange Postecoglou, then they needed to get a move on when it comes to the next manager that they bring in, because then it just feels like these other clubs have taken advantage of this kind of gray period that we've been in, where we're trying to sign a new manager while other clubs already know who their manager is, and they're signing these guys, like you said, that probably could have been on our list, like a Cunha, maybe even a Kirkesh or an Ait Nouri. Even, you know, what Chelsea are bringing in with Liam Delap, like what was that, like 30 million pounds? That seems pretty achievable for what Spurs could have done over the summer. I think even the Bino Gittins guy, you know, from Dortmund, you know, is someone that you could see is kind of a bit of a Spurs signing, you know, someone that's a bit raw but very talented, you know, takes on players, very good winger. You know, a lot of these ones, like to a degree, like you said, could have been on Spurs' list, but they weren't able to get them over the line because almost from the get-go, we've started, you know, a bit on the back foot in terms of starting slowly because we had to sack the manager, or they felt the need, you know, to sack the manager. But then they didn't get the move on pretty quickly after that. So I think maybe to a degree, Eddie has some points, you know, to some extent. Jacob Anderson saying, what do you guys think about Pedro Gonçalves? I think he is class, but we should look at Gyökeres since he wants out. We have the money to change the team. It's my other concern, Jacob, is like, I know it seems like Spurs are waiting until the end of the financial, you know, sort of year. They're going to wait till July 1st, but I felt like we already know that we have a lot of PSR wiggle room anyways, you know, like we're, you know, being told that Spurs can always spend pretty much at any given moment, something like 300 to 400 million, at least we were told, you know, without getting in trouble at all, you know, with PSR. So why do they feel the need to wait until July 1st? To be honest, I'm not surprised. I was telling that to Dave before we even started going live today. I was like, you know what, it's how we operate, it's just how we do things. You know, we just seem to do everything literally by the books, you know, very accountant sort of focused and heavy. But surely Spurs should have been able to get some type of major signing maybe done by now at this point. But it just seems like they're going by, you know, the financial schedule, you know, by how they draw it up, I guess. With Pedro Gonçalves, like, I'm a little confused why he hasn't ever been picked up yet. Maybe because Sporting, you know, their owner is a bit like Levy, so he's kind of a guy who also kind of, you know, waits till he gets the right price on somebody, and he's always been pretty highly rated. And I think he's just been waiting for that big step up, you know, to a new club, because, you know, I think it was 4 years ago, I think, you know, we were talking about him being a good signing, you know, for Spurs. He was one of the top goal scorers in the Premier Liga not too long ago, and he's creative, scores goals. Be a lot of fun to have at the team. With Gyökeres, I don't know. I don't know if it's really possible. That's like big money that Spurs probably aren't really willing to spend, even though it'd be great if they did. And we already have Solanke and Richarlison, so it's almost like that Gyökeres signing might have been more for last summer when we were kind of finding the new striker to take over from Harry Kane, and I think we missed that window.
Look, I really like Pedro Gonçalves. You know, I said back when we were linked with him and James Maddison, I said I would have preferred Pedro Gonçalves. Look, I just think, around this whole Gyökeres situation right now, I think, you know, Sporting are a very, very hard club to deal with, especially when it coming to Gyökeres right now. They don't really want to play ball. They sort of want to keep him, or they want to, basically get £100 million plus. I presume they probably look at Pedro Gonçalves and will want a huge fee as well. Notoriously, a lot of these players are coming out of the Portuguese league the last 4 or 5 years for big money. You know what I mean? You look at Diaz that went to Liverpool for the money he went and stuff like that. So, look, it could be a case where we're turned off, after trying to deal with them for Pedro Porro, But, look, at the end of the day, these are the sort of players we should be after, Jacob Anderson. These are the sort of players that you make statements with. I'm not being funny, but if the likes of Aston Villa can fucking bring in, what's your man's name from PSG, Asensio, there's no reason why we can't be in the ballpark for some of these players, man. No reason whatsoever. Like I said, I'm fed up with the excuses.
To back you up, Jacob, even Soul Sniper saying don't need to, but a second first choice number 9. All clubs are doing it now. Liverpool changed their calendar financial year. That's why they're moving super early. But he's right, pointing out that Liam Delap and Nicholas Jackson, right, are there to compete with each other. It'd be nice if Spurs could try to pull something off kind of similar, especially if we're both going to be in the Champions League. Thank you, by the way, Jacob. I know you've been with us for a long time, so thank you for the support, by the way. And also, everybody, do follow Sam on Twitter. I'm going to put his link in again here as we're wrapping up the show, and of course, get into the members post as well. A benefit for all the members is that we answer some questions of yours as we wrap up the show. Jerome saying Arsenal have signed Zubimendi and we signed Takai. Langa is cooking people. The Zubimendi deal, I think, has been done for pretty much a long time, to be fair, with Arsenal. But I know what you're saying, Jerome. Like, I just think Johan Lange, I don't think he has the pull and kind of the ability to bring in, the real, how do you put it? Like, with Paratici, even though he's in a way hamstrung by Levy and hamstrung by Spurs, he seemed to find a way to still get it done, despite that. Whereas Johan Lange doesn't seem to know how to pull the strings in the same way that Paratici does. Granted, when you have Levy as the owner, you are going to struggle, to be able to compete with some of these other clubs because you might not have the money, might not be able to structure the deal in the same way that they can. But Paratici seemed to find a way, and he also seemed to have those connections with other clubs, maybe because he has dirt maybe on other clubs or something. We know he's got the big black book, that he's gotten in trouble for. But Johan Lange just seems to kind of go with whatever's easy. He doesn't seem to go for players that maybe we're competing with, with other clubs by the looks of things. But yeah, Jerome, man, we'll see. We'll see if it's a Johan Lange summer. We'll see if it's a Paratici summer. Good to see Big D. Good to see Shawnee Maddox. Good to see Kim AD as well joining the show as of late. But I think we're going to get over to the members section here. Please, everybody, do follow Sam on Twitter, though. I'm putting in his link in here one more time. I'm going to bring up the members' comments in here, do a little bit of multitasking for you guys here. Again, I put it up a little bit late, but always look out for this, during all of these panel shows on Tuesdays. Do look out for this, by the way, everybody. Let's get to Dropkick Your Teacher, Artist T straight away, saying, Dave, you need to take some photos from the wedding. We need a photo of you in a suit just like Sam.
Nah, look, to be honest with you, like being at the wedding, it's one of my worst nightmares, to be quite frank. I'm a tracksuit guy, always have been, always will be. Don't like wearing suits. I look like a spud, a big potato in a suit, so I'm not wearing it. I'll wear one, actually. Sorry, I have to wear one. Mrs. is making me, but I'm not taking photos. Take photos of where I am and show you where I am, but you're not getting a photo of me in a suit. No way.
To be fair, that photo is actually not from a wedding. The full photo is a photo of me standing next to the Premier League trophy, because I was at a event where they were honouring Ian Wright and Emma Hayes, and Defoe gave the award to Ian Wright, so I got to meet Defoe, which was pretty sick. But I was actually working, sadly.
Nice. Yeah.
I'm also going to make a move, guys, because my
no worries.
Yeah, go ahead, Sam. Thank you. Appreciate you as always.
Thank you very much, boys. And I will catch you very soon. Big up, chat, like and subscribe, and I'm out.
See you soon, Sammy.
Great job, guys.
Sam's link is here, guys, so just get on that. Make sure you get over. He likes to be controversial on Twitter and get debates going, so join him.
Good to see Ian in the house, as well as Jacob Anderson. Thanks for the kind comment saying, pick up, guys, best Spurs channel out there. I'm tired of Levy trying to sell the fans on the club, only being able to spend big money on one player per window. Honestly, we could drop 200 million easy. I think like the good point that you make there, Jacob, is like, and I do this all the time. Like Dave, sometimes catches me on this where it's kind of like, well, that's just kind of how we do things. That's like how Spurs always operate. And it's like, yeah, but why do we become so conditioned to that? Why is it that we just sort of accept this is how Spurs do things? I think even, I'm not calling out Shawnee or anything in the comments, but Sean was like, he said, Spurs always operate slowly. This is just how we are. And it's like, yeah, but I think we were allowed to then, kind of bring up the fact that we need to break that cycle. We need to break that sort of habit, because we end up hurting ourselves. It's not benefiting us to move slowly all the time. When has it really, helped us? It doesn't help us. And I think it's good to call it out. Again, I'm only using Shawnee. And because I do the same thing, what Sean said in the comments, I sometimes say. I said it to Dave. I was like, well, they operate by the book, so they're just going to wait till July 1st, to get the deals done. And it's like, yeah, but why do they have to just do that every time? Why can't they just break the mold, a bit more? So I think that's a great comment, Jacob. And thank you for the love as well. Ian Ferguson, member for 39 months, had a great phone call with you the other day, my friend. And thanks for reaching that 40-month mark. You're so close to it, like so many people. Now it's like a whole handful of people that are now reaching the 40-month mark. Really appreciate you guys. And in case you're not a member, or in case you are a member, do look back on that video that we did where we reacted to our season predictions from the last season. I think it was a lot of fun. I think it's good members only content where it was laid back, pretty easy, but we had a good laugh about some things as well. So in case you missed it, do look out for that, everybody. It was a good video, good live stream. And of course, when the season gets back underway, you'll start to see a lot of the perks and benefits of being a member. But thank you, Ian, for the longevity of support and all the love, my man. For the season predictions, Artist T says, can we get a new category? Most likely to cause you to rip your hair out, or most likely to make you break your TV. I don't mind that suggestion. I don't mind it.
I'll write that now.
Most infuriating, to smash
really. TV.
Yeah, most infuriating player. Who will piss us off the most? He says, keep, bench, sell, contract ripped up, and shot out of a cannon because they piss you off that much. Richie, Tell, Davies, Langa. Keep, Tell, bench, Richie, sell,
Davies. No,
Langa. No, rip up
sell
Davies
Langa.
Contract, sell Langa. Yeah.
Put Davies in the cannon. Just for all the years he's annoyed me.
Which teams do you not want to face in Europe? PSG.
Yeah, right now, PSG. Bayern Munich, they're another one that'll rip us a new asshole. There's a lot of them. A lot of them. A lot of the top teams around Europe. Real Madrid would destroy us, play us off the park. Possibly Barcelona as well. A lot of them. A lot of them will play us off the park. A lot of the top teams.
What's funny, though, is I've heard a lot of the teams that we had played against in that Europa League run will actually end up being in the Champions League this season. So some of the teams will recognize from the Europa League campaign from last year. Do you think we'll win a cup this season? And if not, do you think we'll qualify for Europe as a cushion? I think Thomas Frank has been brought in to probably finish in those European places. I think that will be kind of the bare minimum. But then he'll also be expected to challenge for a cup at the same time. I think it's more likely going to be one of the domestic competitions, though, right? FA Cup or League Cup. Be nice to go after the League Cup this season. We just always seem to bow out, in a kind of a tough manner, either way too early or, this last season against Liverpool. And we had that hope and that dream of maybe getting to the final and then only to get spanked in the second leg. So I don't know, maybe a second try at the League Cup, here would be nice. So I'm going to go League Cup. Carabao Cup, the official term for it. And then I think clearly they sacked Ange because the manager has to finish in those European spots. I think that's part of the reason Ange was sacked. So I think that's just a bare minimum.
Yeah, look, for me, I don't see us winning a trophy. Thomas Frank has never won a trophy. I do think we'll qualify for Europe. I think fans will get exactly what they wanted. We'll finish higher up the league and no domestic cup, no cups.
Which teams do you not want to face? The fact that our first signing is from Langa, do you think this window is shaping up to be a dud outside of Eze possibly?
Yep.
We kind of touched on the part of maybe it's going to be a hybrid window of Johan Langa and Paratici, and then we might start to see more of the impact of Paratici, maybe the following window in the January window, or maybe in the next summer. It seems like at the minute, it's still going to be very Johan Langa focused. Dave seems to be going early, thinking that it's going to be a dud of a window. Artist T, I think we covered that. pretty extensively on
I
the
hope
show.
I'm wrong, by the way, and I will eat humble pie if they bring in 3-4 fucking players ready to go. I said, you know what? Fair play. Maybe I was a bit impatient. But all last summer, people disowned me. Dave, you're being impatient. The window doesn't close till here. Blah, 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 blah. Tell people they're not ready made. It's going to be problems. People say I was wrong. Window closed. Everyone's outraged. There's no point being outraged when windows closed. I can't do anything about it.
Who's the most overrated player in our squad right now? I'd argue Ben Davis, because the fact that he's still called Mr. Reliable and everybody's saying giving him a lifetime contract is insane to me. I don't understand how that guy has done that much in people's eyes, to just, people are like, oh, give him whatever he wants. It's like, really, has he actually been that good, over his time at Spurs that you just give him whatever he wants? I would argue Ben Davis. Even just the nickname that I've seen given to him of Mr. Reliable, I think insane. I don't think Ben Davis has ever been close to that, deserving of a nickname of that sort, because Mr. Reliable is the context of someone that game in, game out delivers, game in, game out, like 7 and 8 out of 10. The fact that I've seen that said about Ben Davis, I think, is just insane to me. I'm not even trying to hate on him. I just think it's a very, very generous nickname. So in that context, I think that qualifies as overrated. Do you have a sinking feeling we'll be back here again in 1 to 2 years looking for a new manager? Dave, how about you take that one?
Hope not. I do hope that, we can have Frank here for 4 to 5 years. I think stability in the job ultimately is what will drag Tottenham to where we need to go, combined with, proper signings to fix proper holes in the squad and not taking punts and risks all the time. I think we can avoid it. But ultimately, you look at Tottenham's trend, even Ange won a trophy, he's still gone. So, yeah, we probably will be here in 2 years' time.
Then you also have what's everyone having for a meal tonight? I think I'm doing chicken wings, baked chicken wings.
Nice. I think I'm going to have chicken and veg gravy pie.
It's going to be a hot one, though, tonight. So maybe I might have to change course, because leaving the oven on for that long when it's going to be, a hot
chicken
evening,
wings is a good, nice sort of not a filling meal, though, for the summer, though, Jacko.
It is good, but when I don't have AC yet, I'm trying to get away with maybe no AC this summer, because you only really need it for like 1 month in Seattle, if not at all. But and you leave the oven on at like 400 degrees, it doesn't really make it that much easier. Shemtan saying, can someone please tell me the last time we spent an entire window talking about bringing in the same 2 to 3 players and actually brought them in, even 1 or 2 of them? I think what he's saying is, when has there ever been a window where we're linked to these same players and then we actually do get it over the line?
Look, with the way the transfer window has gone, it's never going to be like that moving forward. You've got journalists who need to print stories to get paid.
Yeah,
You've got,
I was going to say that.
Media companies that need to continuously feed the rumor mill. Sky Sports going 24 hours a day. They need stuff. You've got agents putting out fake rumors out there, to get the best deal for their client or get the wages that they're demanding, stuff like that. The transfer market has gone into one big absolutely fuckery. There's no control over it whatsoever. It's disgrace. You got people just printing rumors willy-nilly, and even stuff that some of them do print. Tottenham are, Eze's on Tottenham shortlist. Well, that's fucking obvious, isn't it? You know what I mean? That's not information. You would like to think a good quality player like Eze should automatically be considered by Tottenham Hotspur. It's madness. I look, the transfer window is out of control. The transfer windows, I hate him.
Ryan saying, big up, guys. I'm glad that we have Thomas Frank the engine. Yes, I believe we will get Eze. Oh, Ryan, all of a sudden, has confidence in Daniel Levy to get the job done. But he's saying, Dave, do you think Daniel Levy's interview was a PR stunt? And Jacko, how many men will we sign this summer? Finally glad to see you home. Dave, Daniel Levy's interview, I mean, it's always going to be a PR stunt. That's not even a slight on him. It's just, he is going to glow up the decisions, and he is going to back, the moves by the club and, by Vinay. So I don't know. I think it's always going to be a PR sort of promotion of some kind. And that's not even a negative. It's just how it is. You are going to sort of gas yourself up.
To be honest, I was looking at the video and it was like, who wanted to bet who the most. It was embarrassing to a large degree. look, at the end of the day, a lot of the stuff they put out is PR stunts, isn't it? Even the videos they put out of the players playing FIFA or shit like that. Reality is, does anyone really care about them playing FIFA? No, we don't. But it's all for PR to keep you tuned in, keep you clicking, everything else.
Yeah, I think it's just always going to be that way. And that's kind of just in life in general, whenever you're going to have like the CEO or the head of whatever organization, doing a video like that, it's always, they're not going to talk negatively, about whatever might be happening or going on. But how many men will we sign? Let's say probably 4 to 5 is what I'm thinking this summer, Ryan. I think it will be 2 forwards. So you already count maybe Matisse Tell, and then we'll sign another forward. If we sell Richarlison, then maybe it will be, I don't even know if they'll replace Richarlison. Maybe they'll just see Tell as like a backup to Solanke. So I'm going to say 2 forwards, 1 midfielder, 3. We already have a defender, 4. And then we might hopefully bring in another fullback, to compete with the likes of Udogie and Pedro Porro. So I'm going to say 5. I'm going to say 5 this summer, Ryan. Sean Maddox saying, does signing Eze solve problems in our squad? Do you believe the reports about Frank wanting to keep Hill Messi and Phillips? First one, Dave. I mean, do you think Eze is the right signing for Spurs?
Yeah, every time he gets on the ball, he's a threat. He's consistent. He offers consistent quality. You look at a lot of our forwards last season. I remember one move, Pedro Porro on the ball against Bournemouth. 3 players to aim for. Kirkus turns it over, crosses it in, the ball's in the back of our own net. From a position that if Eze was on the ball, we got shot off on goal. He solves a massive issue within our squad. We need quality across that forward line. And quality is a player that's consistent, that can step up most weeks. That's what we lack, So for me, yes, I think Eze does solve problems going forward.
Jacob Anderson from earlier saying, I don't see why Levy is saying that he wants to win the Champions League and the Premier League when he knows we don't have near the players of top clubs in the league. I think that's just where we're coming from, right? If we're going to be pushing Chelsea, these teams, we would think we'd be doing similar business, to them. We haven't done. That's just, I guess Dave is saying, hopefully by the end of the summer, we can say that we have done. It does feel like we're starting off on the back foot, compared to some of the others.
What I will say just quickly as well to Shawnee Maddox's comment about Eze, I don't think he solves all of our problems. I still think you need a quality winger either side. Again, full of consistency that when he gets the ball, he can take on his man and cause a problem. He doesn't solve all of our problems, but he certainly goes a long way to helping the problems.
Yeah. Then Ian Ferguson saying most likely to make you question your love for the club category. I think he's saying beginning of season predictions. I think that's very funny. I'll consider that one.
Oh, we're reading the comment. I was trying to look for it on the YouTube page there. Most likely to make you question your love for the club category.
That's very good.
Yeah,
I think that's
I'll write that one
down. Paul Connor saying, personally, I can see us hitting the 1st of July and things will go very fast. I think the deals are already done. The only reason Tell and Danzo got done early was that it was leftovers from January. Yeah, I mean, we all knew that those were, I think, get done. Even the Matisse Tell one was rumored pretty early there, Paul. Hopefully that's the case, man, that, July 1st hits, then all of a sudden Dave and I become very, very busy.
Why do we have to wait for this magical date of 1st of July? Tottenham could have signed players sooner. We don't have to wait till the 1st of July. This thing, we don't have to wait.
Overrated Dragishin.
You've already missed a month by waiting till the 1st of July.
Dragishin's a good shout from K32. Kulu is overrated, says Phil Goyes. Phil, it's been a while, man. I want you to come on the fan shows. Love you to give that to Dave.
Good to see you.
Dave's the president of the Kulu Army, so I know he would like to have a back and forth with you, on that. Do you think Eze provides stability to the forward line? Stability is the sexy word, Dave. That's your new favorite word, John. That's your new favorite word. You get a turn on from that word.
Well, he must be coming out now.
I think he provides excitement, not just stability. He provides actual quality, not stability. I think he pushes us on.
Exactly. That's the thing. Provides quality, stability. Yeah. And look, you must be frank out now, Sean, because he didn't speak about stability in his interview. He spoke about sexy attacking football, which is the way I love it to be played. So you must be frank out now, actually.
Do you believe the reports of him keeping Hill Messi and Phillips? I do not. I think the Hill Messi one was actually from a a meme account. I was saying that to
Yeah,
Dave.
you're saying that to me.
Actually,
Because I was getting
a
my
very
hopes up.
yeah, it's like Tottenham independent transfer stories on Twitter. I think they're more of a joke kind of comedy account than they actually are any sort of ITK. Seems like nobody's leaving if you read the media except Son. Who do you think is going to be sold? Dave, any big I think Richarlison has a chance of being sold still. I think Son, Suma, yeah, those are definitely three. Any others?
I think with Bissouma, he would really test Thomas Frank. With the likes of being on the balloons and shit. I think he'll really test Thomas Frank. I mean, Thomas Frank has a zero dickhead policy. So, I think someone like Bissouma will be out. Richarlison, look, honestly, I don't think the club sells if it's for like 20, 25 million. I think if you're talking between 46, 60 million, I think the club will go, okay, go and speak to our player. But if that doesn't come in, I think the club will look at it and go, well, him and Solanke fighting, we'll keep that next year. I know the big risk about Richarlison staying fit and stuff like that, but I genuinely don't see them selling Richarlison unless they recoup 40 to 50 million.
Good to see
Draxler could be an interesting one, Jack.
AK Sheg saying, as a provides quality, walks into the team as an attacker, hands down. Completely agree. Yeah, I think Dragic, just kind of processed what you just said there. Yeah, Dave, I think Dragic, with all the new center backs coming through, and Dragic kind of really did not have a hot year, in my opinion, and with the noise that the agent makes, are Spurs really that keen on keeping him, especially if he doesn't impress Thomas Frank? It seems like he's more of someone that could be sold on, maybe next summer rather than this summer, especially because he's injured. It's hard to sell an injured player to anybody.
And then just quickly, Paul goes, PSR, Dave, we had a season without Europe and we had splashed 400 million 2 seasons plus add 17 million to change managers. I think come July 1st, we are clear as we have to have Champions League revenue. Again, Man United don't. They still went and splashed 60 odd million on fucking Matisse Cunha. Again, look, I get what you're saying, Paul, but for me, we say these things, but we don't look at what other clubs are doing and how they're doing it. We're like, I get what you're saying there, but Man United don't. They still went and splashed 62 million on Cunha.
Thank you, everybody, for the support today. I think we had well over 340, 350 for a long time. Around 160 likes. If you haven't smashed the like button, please do. Thank you as well to all the members, for giving in their questions towards the end. Thanks to anybody that is a member of the channel. You help us out a ton, especially over the summer when things can get hot, but things can also get very cold, sort of when it comes to the news and the buzz around Tottenham. So anybody that's supporting us over the summer, we really do appreciate it. Looking forward to this season getting underway. Look out for plenty more content coming your way. But apart from that, thanks for being here with us.
No live show tomorrow, if I'm correct. I'm at a wedding and you're at a game, aren't you?
But I'll be around, tomorrow. Okay. I'll release a scout report for tomorrow for
Takai. Signs, there'll be a live show.
Yeah, I'll be around tomorrow. Yeah. But Takai scout report, look out for that, everyone. Thursday, I'll run the fan show, so please, everybody, join me. Have a conversation with me. We'll go on for about 2 hours, and the roundtable discussion. Would love to have you there with me. Apart from that, thank you guys again for supporting the channel, and we'll see you all next time. Yeah. And a great show, great comments, great discussion, good questions. Thank you guys for being here with us.
See y'all soon, everybody. Enjoy yourself.
Enjoy the rest of your evenings. Come on, you Spurs, and hopefully July 1st things start getting busy. See you soon, everybody. Hopefully.
If there's not, Paul, I'll be ringing you. Great challenge. Don't you dare, F.